So today I really want to talk about link building in general, a little bit of best practice for building links, a little bit of outreach strategy, but also about link metrics and how that's changed a lot, certainly for Branded3 over the past few years. I've been with the company for about 4.5 years now, and when I started I was a link builder. That's my first job with the company, and I remember link building being a whole lot different to how it is now. And the way that we kind of structure it within the company is, instead of having technical link builders, as we used to do when I started out, we have a PR team who do traditional digital only, but traditional PR using media databases and the same kind of PR tactics that agencies doing PR have used for 50, 60, 70 years. So it's really a different world to where I started at actually building links. My role in this process is much more around link strategy and really what's the target audience, who are we trying to reach, who do clients want to be in front of, and also how do we relay this information to clients, how do we report on link building, and how is that going to really affect search rankings, search traffic, conversions moving forwards. So I think the first thing to talk about really is that change in link building that's happened. And I mean, I think a lot of people are tempted to say that the reason we've renamed link building as PR is simply because it sounds sexier, it sounds better. And I think that's a little bit of a, it's not quite right, simply because the big difference as far as I'm concerned is that it's called PR because it's public facing. The difference between our links now versus our links 5, 10 years ago is we fully expect every single one of them to be seen by people who would potentially buy from the company that we're promoting. So talking a little bit about how the world has changed when it comes to digital. We've always worked with PR agencies. Even when we were just a technical SEO agency, we worked quite closely with PR agencies as well. And it was really split out into something a little bit like this, like a traditional marketing funnel. Really, we weren't responsible for awareness of the brand, and we weren't really responsible for a lot of the website, to be fair. Our metrics really were more around actually driving traffic to the website and hoping that it converts. It's not about actual brand presence in SEO until quite recently, really. So as a result, the way that people thought about SEO and the way that certainly people who don't necessarily work closely with SEO have thought about SEO is link building looked a lot like this. It's really not public-facing stuff. It's where can I place a link that it's going to give the maximum value to a client from a search perspective only, but no consideration whatsoever in where it's going to give the maximum value to a customer and help them to make a decision that actually they want to click that link and they want to come through to our website and they want to buy something. So that was a huge problem for us. It was never going to drive awareness for our brand, so we were only adding half the value that we as PRs, as link builders, really should be adding. And a second problem is that it really didn't help consumers. So all we were really doing was helping ourselves, and that's why that attitude of do it for Google and not necessarily for the audience has come in. And it's very different now. Really, Google is moving down that funnel, and we're moving up as an SEO agency. So now Google is not only concerned with the optimization of a website, but actually how big a brand is. Google wants to rank brands. Google wants to rank websites that are well known. People want to find them. Therefore, that's what gets you to the top of the search results. So huge ranking factors have sprung out, like things like above-the-line advertising and outdoor advertising and any kind of offline activity, press activity, that isn't necessarily linking to a website, isn't even necessarily digital, are actually really driving search performance for a lot of the brands that we work with. And Google really doesn't want to rank a website at all unless it's got every single one of these bases covered. So whereas an SEO agency in the past, we might have been considering getting traffic to the website and then it's someone else's problem, nowadays, if you don't firstly make people aware that your brand is a good brand to click on, and then give them the information that they need so that they can potentially buy something from your brand, and then keep them there and not get them back to Google, not let them click on the second result down, the third result down, or whatever. Unless you're taking measures to cover all of those bases, you're never going to rank. And it really comes into this zero moment of truth piece that Google released. It's 5 years old now, but it's Google branded because it is literally Google's manifesto of what it wants to rank a website for. I don't know if you guys have all read the study. It's on zeromomentoftruth.com, and it's definitely worth reading. It's definitely still applicable, even if all the data is perhaps a little bit out of date. But what it says is that people who are looking to make a purchase will consume a certain number of resources, whether that's web pages or social media threads or forum threads or whatever it might be. People consume a certain number of those before they will even consider making a purchase. And the average number across all industries is around 10. And we've got to assume that since smartphone ownership's doubled in that time, Facebook logins have doubled in that time, and so many new social networks and websites have sprung up since then, we've got to assume that people have so much information that they're really consuming as much of it as they possibly can, and not just relying on the one or two traditional media sources for that information. So how we really come into that is by making sure that firstly we're as many of those resources as possible. We're providing all of the information that people would require if they're going to make a purchase, but also making sure that people are able to find those resources, whether that's on our website or somewhere else. And that's one of the old traditional tactics of PR, really. So if we're going to go down the funnel a little bit and talk about awareness, which is not traditionally our metric, we've got to remember that no one ranks on awareness alone. You can be the biggest company in the world, and if you look at the Fortune 500s and the FTSE 250s and whatever, many of them are huge companies with billions of pounds in revenue, but terrible, terrible websites, and as a result they don't rank. And this is something that SEO has been incredibly frustrated with for a really long time now. It's nothing new. But you've got to look at brand size as well. So a really nice example is the Marketing Magazine produce a brand asset valuator every year, which basically says how much a brand is really worth as far as things like loyalty and respect go. So a nice example would be the AA in the UK. Literally the most trusted brand in the UK. Google really people really do trust the AA, and people will go to the AA for their breakdown cover. But if you actually look at Google and you look at all the other factors that we consider in this, and we just look at share of the market, the AA are really not doing very well. You can see them on the left-hand side there. Around 20% of people will visit the AA at some point if they're looking for breakdown cover. But that's literally a third, less than a third of the number of people that will visit Money Supermarket. It's less than some of the other price comparison sites, and it's certainly less than some of their smaller competitors like Green Flag. So just being the biggest brand isn't going to help you. You've got to get PR coverage, sure, you've got to get that above the line advertising, but you've got to make sure that you're making the most of it. And that's one of the big misunderstandings about search engine optimization. When people say that, people think that optimization deals just with the website, and it doesn't. Optimization is making sure that we're making any marketing campaign, above the line or radio or anything that a brand is doing, we're making that work for search visibility as well. So how do we do SEO now? How's things changed? Well, from a PR and link building perspective, where once we might be doing something like text link ads, we're now doing proper PR. So we work with a spread betting company who are really interested in share prices. And if anyone who's interested in shares reads one of our stories and clicks through, then we're actually a really good result for that particular person if they click through. They can, as an example here, we placed a story when Sir Alex Ferguson retired as Manchester United manager. People were really interested in the price of the shares of Manchester United and will they survive when Ferguson leaves. With something as simple as just a comment from our analyst, which is a little bit further down the page, we were able to firstly get a link on CNN, which is fantastic from an SEO perspective, but also we're right in front of the target audience. If someone's interested in the share price, they can buy shares in Manchester United via our website, and it really extends to any number of websites. It's not just about relevant blogs, as a lot of people think it is when it comes to link building. It's not just if you're a travel brand, you want to be on travel blogs. You probably don't. You probably don't want to be on travel blogs at all. You want to be on lifestyle blogs where people talk about holidays, not talk about backpacking. And it's exactly the same when it comes to a brand like this who do shares and stocks. Just to comment on how much Twitter's worth, the IPO, literally 2 lines of text and we can get on the Telegraph. And the grocer is really sort of the holy grail of publications, because people who are interested in retail and specifically the price of brands and the price of companies read this magazine and are able to click through and potentially buy what we're selling as well as getting a link. So we call this growth through engagement, and that's how we grow brands in search visibility. It's not just about any link. Any link isn't as good as any other link. The best links are the ones where people will click through and people will convert, because Google doesn't just care about popularity. Google doesn't just care about people coming to the website and not just people able to navigate the website and understand how the website works, but Google cares about the whole thing. Google cares about who wants to find it and are they able to do what they want to. And when you look at how PR's changed as well, PRs used to use a metric called advertising value equivalency, which is literally, if I'd paid for this coverage, how much would it have cost me? And that's how I provide the value of what I do. And PRs don't even use that anymore. There is so much coverage available on any number of websites in the world that it's just not a good metric. And what we really care about is attribution. And one of the fantastic things about links is that it's really easy to track where people are going, where people are coming from to your website, and actually track the value of PR. So we can help PR agencies. SEO practitioners can help their PR teams by helping them to measure the success of what they're doing, measure how many people are coming through those links and how many people are converting from those links, just by using tools like Google Analytics. Another thing that's very different with how the SEO industry works compared to the PR industry is we know what Google wants. It's not just about coverage, it's not even just about target audience, but we've got that knowledge of actually what is going to get you penalized, what is going to cause problems for you if you do that. And some traditional PR tactics, just sending gifts to influencers for reviews and that sort of thing, or buying advertorials, are things that we know within the SEO industry that we don't want to do that. So another problem is native advertising is obviously a huge topic at the minute and really something that a lot of people are considering, a lot of people are actually actively putting budget into. But when you look at proper native advertising, where it basically does look a lot like an advertorial, and this is a tactic that people are using within the PR industry and the content marketing industry to get brands in front of people, but they don't necessarily understand the impact of what they're doing. And obviously, one of the traditional tactics of a PR practitioner is press releases. And as an SEO industry, we know that syndication is almost certainly going to get you penalized. Even just the traditional PR sites like Newswires and PR Web and that sort of thing, syndicating press releases with links in it is never a good idea. So it's not something that we would ever do at all. So links from press releases will get you penalized, and that is a problem. But actually, one thing that PR can tell us, and one thing that we need to bear in mind, is that nobody really hangs around on PR Newswire anymore. Newsrooms are getting so small, and journalists are so busy that actually they don't necessarily actively go out looking for news anymore. You don't have to hang around on PR Newswire or anything like that if you want to find a story, because the stories come to you in the form of outreach, or if you're the Daily Mail, just copying what everyone else is doing. So one thing that's massively different from an SEO perspective is we know how the internet works as well. So we also know that actually when people are actively looking for stories, and when we're trying to reach those influencers, when we're trying to reach the people who have the keys to the best links, the kind of places that they actually hang around on aren't PR Newswire, but they're actually Reddit and Hacker News and that kind of early influencer outreach opportunities, where actually tomorrow's news is being made on Hacker News and Reddit today. So these, if you are looking to create content and provide links that way, these are absolutely the kind of places that you would want to be seen. You definitely don't want to be creating a piece of content and syndicating a press release about the fact that you've done it. What we can learn from PR, of course, is that they have successfully taken some of their tactics online. And just the journal request hashtag on Twitter, where people who are available to give you links, people who can write about you, are looking for something specific that you might be able to provide. Just tweet to this hashtag, and you're able to see exactly what they want, how to reach them, and can make an informed decision about, do I have that kind of information? Do I have that asset? Can I reach out to them? And it's really that simple. So when we're looking at syndication a little bit, we've got to bear in mind that actually content, if it's worth syndicating, someone else will do it. Syndicating your own content is probably an indication that other people don't like it. It's much more worthwhile to create something better and outreach to influencers who might syndicate it for you or might not. But the key thing is that you're reaching the right people in the first place. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a syndication story, which I didn't syndicate, but it had a massive success for Branded3. It's actually the biggest source of links that we've ever had. And it's a story that I wrote on the blog. It's about a social network called Path. I don't know if anyone remembers Path, because it is kind of disappeared to an extent. But Path was a social network that was branded as being more intimate for a lot of people. So it wasn't about getting the biggest number of followers. It wasn't about connecting with the most possible people. It was about keeping, a very close core of people who you really want to talk to every day in contact with you. So this is an app. I installed this app. I didn't like it at all, and I deleted it. And to cut a long story short, the next morning at 6 a.m., the app texted everyone in my phone book. Now in the UK, that means that if you text a landline, it rings and a robo voice reads out the message. So I made a lot of people quite unhappy when this happened, because they were getting phone calls at 6 a.m. from someone that sounded like Microsoft Sam, telling them that I have photos to share with them, which I really don't. So I wrote a story about this. It taps into some of the themes that have been popular for quite a while now about privacy and security and that kind of thing. And I didn't really think anything of it, because I write on the blog for branded3.com most days, to be honest, at least once a week. So this story isn't necessarily anything different to what I usually do. But the way that this spread was literally someone put it on Hacker News for me, someone that just happened to be following Branded3 on Twitter, or who happened to find it somewhere after someone had tweeted it, added it to Hacker News. And from this point, a journalist at The Verge got in touch with me. So I know from experience that journalists on some of the biggest websites in the world are reading websites like this, where the people who kind of do the job every day are browsing and talking to each other. So from there it spiraled, and we ended up with links from Engadget and GigaOM and Digital Trends, and 2 on The Guardian, and a few more on TechCrunch and all that sort of thing. But I think the moral of the story that I'm trying to get across really is that if I'd have syndicated this, I don't have the authority to do that. I'm not well known enough on Hacker News to get talked about. What I really needed to do is find someone who is well known enough, who can talk in the language of the people who are reading that publication, who are reading that website. So people really do tell their own stories. People will read a blog post, they'll take a piece of content, they'll take an infographic or an interactive graphic or whatever it might be, and they will take it and make it their own. They will post about it with their own comment, with their own spin. And I'm going to talk about a little bit a case study, and a case study where link building was priority, and the measurements of the campaign were, yes, number of links that we would drive from this, but also number of conversions and how we could potentially turn those links into traffic that became customers. So this is for a company called Transform, who are a cosmetic surgery company based in the UK, and they were celebrating at the time their 40th birthday, the 40th anniversary since the company came about. So we decided to tie a campaign into this and talk about how Transform are a respected provider who've been around for a long time, who have a lot of data, and who have talked to a lot of potential customers, talked to a lot of customers who are just like the kind of people that might potentially read this bit of content. So what we did was we created this interactive map which just plots out 4 years of their CRM data. Who did they talk to, what did they talk to them about, and where does that person come from? And it's as simple as that. So you can see in the map, if you are selecting a town near you, perhaps the town that you live in, and a particular procedure, you can see how many women and how many men have spoken to Transform about that particular procedure. Obviously, this is really interesting stats from a journalistic point of view, because we're able to provide a lot of information, a lot of fun facts to an extent, for people to engage with, but also some quite shocking stats as well. So we launched this initially with the Sun as an exclusive. So this is on the Sun's website, where we iframed this bit of content in, and I think this is one of the key misunderstandings about the phrase link earning as well. People talk about link earning in a way that they expect to be able to create a piece of content that's so good that it will just earn links on its own. Links will just appear. And for me, I don't think that's what link earning is at all. What link earning really means is creating a story that gets you or your brand talked about, that's PR, and then adding so much value to that story that the journalist who's talking about you has to link to you, because you're providing something that they can't provide. And that's why we do things like this, where we've iframed in a map to the Sun's website. It's not even about the link. The Sun's actually behind a paywall, or was at the time. So this link doesn't count anything for Google at all. It really doesn't matter from a search engine optimization perspective in the traditional sense. What we want from this is coverage, exposure, traffic, and potentially conversions, because the Sun is bang on our target audience. People who read the Sun, not exclusively obviously, might be interested in what our company is selling to them. And we also launched this in the Sun offline as well. And clearly, like I said before, this isn't going to provide a link to our website. This isn't going to improve search rankings directly, in the sense that Google is able to transfer PageRank from the Sun to Transform's website. What it does is it means that people who are reading the newspaper, who pick up this newspaper and read this story and are interested in it, will search for our brand, will search for Transform and click on it that way, and provide traffic that way. So the kind of tactics that we use for outreaching generally, PR is just literally media relations. So exactly like you would do with the blogger, you just call or email a journalist. It's exactly the same principle. The big difference really is that journalists are incredibly busy people who don't give you a second chance. A blogger can kind of see the potential and maybe thinks this is something that I could cover and will be willing to chat with you sometimes. Journalists aren't like that at all. If a journalist doesn't have what they need when you give it to them, they won't bother. They won't even email you back. And if you've done it on the phone, they probably won't let you call them again. They'll probably not pick up the phone again. So it's really important to make sure that you're prepared all of the resources that the journalist would possibly need. So in this case, it was the code for embedding the iframe into the sun, and when we're looking at the rest of the publications that we took this to, we took press releases to them. Now, I'm not talking about syndication, nothing that we put on PR Newswire or anything like that. We took press releases in the traditional sense of 300, 400, 500 words that give all the information that a journalist would require, including expert quotes from Transform themselves, stats that they might find interesting, etc., that they can then rip bits out of and save themselves time for when they're writing their own story. And because we had such a large amount of data for this campaign, because there are so many different angles we could go at, we over-prepared. We made sure that when we were creating our press releases, we had as many as possible with as many different types of stats as possible, so that when we reached out to a publication, we were guessing what their target audience would be and using the right press release for that target audience as well. So the PR and the blogger outreach are the two main sources of coverage that we use for this particular campaign. There are obviously loads of other ones, and Facebook advertising, general social advertising is really great for activating a campaign. The downside is obviously, as well as the effort you have to go to, you also have to put some media spend behind it in order to get any coverage. But it is really useful, and for a campaign like this, if we were doing it again, we would definitely put some budget into Facebook advertising, because we know that, again, that's where our audience is. Forums as well are actually a little bit out of fashion because of the kind of tactics that SEOs used to use, which is just spam comments and hiding links behind profile names and that sort of thing. There are real legitimate forums out there that are full of real people having proper conversations and are really engaged, who would potentially be interested in this. They're actually real influencers. You don't have to own your own website in order to be an influencer if people are regularly talking on forums. So that's another tactic that we generally use when we create something, seeding it into a forum as well. And Reddit works the same way. Response Source is an interesting one because it's a paid service where it's exactly like the journo request hashtag, but it comes directly to your email. So a journalist is writing a story about something, and they're looking for someone who can provide them with stats, and they'll credit you with a link or at least a mention if you provide it to them. So that's more of a source of ongoing coverage for a lot of our brands. But PR is really the one that we pushed for this one. And like I said, because we had the amount of data that we had, people were able to use the map and tell their own story. So people were able to either take the story that we gave them and take the story that was the one that was covered in the first publication when we launched it. So the Daily Star covered it, the exact same one about Blackpool being the boob job capital of the UK. But other publications decided to do something different and take different types of surgery, and they assumed that because of their knowledge of their target audience, that's what they'd be most interested in. So we got links on different topics from different publications. And what's really interesting is that some publications will cover anything. So the Daily Mail, of course, covered both of these stories and another one, because whenever anyone posts something with some stats behind it, the Daily Mail will generally rip it off. I would never reach out to the Daily Mail first. I would use an influencer like the Star or the Sun or the Telegraph or the Independent or someone like that as my first port of call, because you know that the Daily Mail is going to copy them, and it's 2 links for the price of 1, which is fantastic. The interesting one for me, of course, is because we were providing a real report, really, into the state of the industry. Some of Transform's competitors wrote about this as well, and obviously they don't link to us because that would be really stupid, but they're referencing things that aren't on their website, hoping people might actually search for this kind of thing, and you don't really want to give your competitors that kind of publicity. But when you do something that, when I was talking about link earning before, when you do something that adds no value like this, where you've ripped out all of the creative, you've ripped out all of the stats, and just posted something dry and boring, nobody engages with it. This isn't going to help the Harley Medical Group sell boob jobs. and it's certainly not going to help them get links. So we've got to look at the metrics that really move a brand and make them more money, really. Social shares aren't actually something that generally we report on. It's a nice to have. It's maybe a secondary KPI, but it's never the measure of success when a campaign gets a lot of shares. What we really look at is traffic as a starting point. So PR links provided 7,000 referrals. 7,000 people clicked the links that we placed and landed on this particular asset. Now, again, when I was talking about link earning, providing that additional value, it's not just in the sense that people who are writing about you will then link to you because you're adding something different, but also people who are clicking the link will then continue to engage with the same story and make their own stories out of an asset once they're there. So huge amount of SEO traffic as well because of the links that we got. But the direct links that we drove, the direct traffic that we drove, the 7,000 here, was really quite a lot. And what was really important to any business is what's that traffic doing when it gets there. And like I said, one of the KPIs for this campaign was, can we get conversions? Can we sell to people using PR directly as well as that SEO benefit from the links? So we generated 65 conversions from that 7,000 people who have read a story on a newspaper and clicked through, which is phenomenal when you look at how much actually the average order value is for Transform. The campaign paid for itself 1.5 times just from the PR links without actually thinking anything at all about the SEO value of the campaign. And the way that we did this, so talking about how do we convert people who are clicking through these links, there's a couple of features that we included in the map. So obviously there's the ability for them to engage with it and to customize it however they want to. But just on this example, if you're looking for Tummy Tuck in Manchester, on the right hand side you've got the number of people who've talked to Transform, which is it's not just for journalists, it's a measure of social proof. We're telling people who are playing with this map that Transform have spoken to 500 people who are living where they live, who are the same gender as them, people who might be just like them. So that's something that's going to encourage them potentially to consider Transform if they're looking for that kind of service. And then below that we have a way into the site without necessarily going back up to the top and clicking on the top navigation, but actually within the asset itself, a nice soft call to action where if you're looking for a tummy tuck in Manchester, you can read a story about someone who has had the exact procedure and go through to our case study section. So they'll leave the asset at this point and start looking as a customer, basically browsing the website and looking whether it's something that they are interested in. So one of the lessons that we had from this really is when you are giving people the ability to create their own stories out of data that you're giving them, it's incredibly important to be reactive. When a journalist comes back to you and said, I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in something else, you've got a very small window to get the stats that they need, to get the information that they're looking for. And it's really hard to be reactive unless you're actually familiar with the data that's powering the asset that you've created, or powering the page, or the infographic even that you've created. So really recommend using pivot tables. You can see the exact numbers of people quite quickly that they might be looking for, and filter a pivot table really easily however someone has asked for those stats. But this does give rise to a problem as well. You don't want to give everything away. You don't want to put absolutely every bit of information you've got in an asset, because otherwise there's no real reason for people to add anything to the story. So the important things to do are firstly to create a seeding list, know in advance who do you want to reach out to. We almost always know who we're going to target before we create something, because Otherwise, we've got no idea who's going to cover it, and we'll end up spending thousands of pounds on making something that might do absolutely nothing for our clients. And what I mentioned before, it's really important to write press releases for specific angles. Don't wait for someone to come back to you and say, I'm interested in something else. Try and anticipate what someone might be interested in when you're pushing something live. And thirdly, let journalists find the data for themselves. Encourage them to play with whatever you're sending them, to have a look at it before it goes live, before you're launching a campaign, and let them feel involved with the process. Ask them, do you have any feedback? Is there something else you'd like to see in here, or is there any reason you wouldn't cover it? One thing that we learned from working with Mashable quite a few times is that they won't include UK prices, so you can't use pounds, you have to use dollars, and they also won't include any creative that has a brand logo on it, but they will link to the brand with a nice followed link in the copy. So we know that when we reach out to Mashable now and give them an asset, we know it has to be in US dollars and it can't have the logo on it. We know what pixel resolution and that sort of thing that Mashable need if they're going to link to it. And it really takes the pain out of it for a journalist to say, yeah, I'll definitely feature this, and copy and paste the code that they need. So what you can do, as well as using your data, is to do something creative. And this also gives rise to a problem, because you need to get a large number of people on board with a creative strategy. It's not just a case of old link building where it's you and a blogger. It's you and a blogger and a designer, copywriter, your social team, and plenty of people who probably need to sign it off as well. And this just means it takes longer. It's really nothing you can do about that. It's no longer a case of you've seen rankings dropping for a particular keyword, so you're going to reach out to some bloggers and get some links for those keywords or anything like that on that topic. If you're going to do something creative, you'll probably get more links out of it, so long term it's probably better, but it takes longer to get it live, and you've got to keep focused while you're putting together a strategy like that. So another example from the Alex Ferguson story when he retired, and again another point about being reactive. We have quite a large team here, so we were able to get quite a few assets out for a few different clients who would find this interesting and on their target audience. So we just created a quick graphic that just shows how many managers have left other clubs in the time that Alex Ferguson was in charge at Manchester United. Now, I say quick, anything that's going to be reactive but also creative, you've got to factor in the fact that there's probably going to be a brainstorm for an hour where people come up with the ideas. It's very rare that you have your best idea within 30 seconds and everyone agrees that they can go off and do it. So putting together the idea in the first place, then talking to the designers and getting time for them to put something together, the actual process of designing it, finding the research as well. It's not necessarily a 2-minute job to find out how many managers have gone through every single club that we were interested in. So you've got to allow time for research and design and everything like that. So even a quick reactive graphic could probably take a day, a working day to get done. So the advantages of this is that data is readily available when it's creative. You can do desk research. You don't necessarily have to have your own data if you're going to make a creative asset. Infographics are quickest to turn around, so if time really is of the essence, then an infographic might be the way to go. But the downside of an infographic is it's not engaging in itself. So you need to be very aware of what else is on the landing page that people will potentially click through to. And also the big downside of infographics is that once it's out there, not many people want to include it as well. So once it's an exclusive on a national newspaper, for example, you'll struggle to get an infographic placed more than once without people starting to ask for payments. And finally, infographics are nice and easy to promote via visual social networks, and creative generally is easy to promote via visual social networks. So I'm talking specifically about Facebook. creative works really well on Facebook, a lot better than just a news story or just a piece of data. And obviously Instagram, Pinterest, a huge source of traffic for some of our clients, and creative assets are a good way to make sure that happens. And the last way that I'll talk about where it's really good for getting links that potentially convert, having an opinion on something. I mentioned it before when we're looking at the spread betting client who are literally just commenting on how share price might be affected by certain events. So Tesco announcing their share price, for example, what does that mean for investors and that kind of thing. It's literally very easy to get links in this way really cheaply with very little effort involved, that are potentially bang on your target audience. If your brand is connected enough to a story to be featured, then you're connected enough to the interests of the people who are reading that story for them to potentially convert. It is difficult if you're an agency to get a client on board with this sometimes. A lot of clients are desperate to not be seen to take a position on anything. This is particularly difficult in finance, for example. So it can take a lot of convincing. My best strategy for convincing people really is to just use case studies, show what we can do with other industries sometimes that are much more difficult to get links in, like payday loans or injury law or something like that. Even just applying an opinion from someone at a payday loans company can get links on national press, and if you're in the right publications, that traffic can convert as well. So my tips for making sure that converting in the sense of actually getting a link from this, have a profile page. If you're using an expert within your company to leverage an opinion to get a link, journalists are much more likely to link to a profile page, so your individual thought leader's page on the website, than they are to link to your brand's homepage. Obviously, you would much rather have a link to your brand's homepage. You'd, in an ideal world, have a link to a product page or something like that. But journalists don't want to do that. Bloggers don't necessarily want to do that either. And you've got to make the decision that actually, would I rather have one link to my homepage or potentially two from different publications to a profile page? If you are really nice to journalists, they might link to both. So it's definitely worth setting that up. Obviously, you've got to say something worthwhile. If your company is one that doesn't want to take an opinion on anything, you probably can't use this tactic, and you are wasting your time trying. If you've got a thought leader within the business, your director of some description, or the CEO or chief exec, who you're asking for an opinion in order to get a link, and they are refusing to say something that's worth linking to, firstly, you're not going to get a link. And secondly, you're going to have to go back to that person and say you wasted their time if you ever want to get a link again out of that. So as a result, it's probably worth cutting your losses. And thirdly, it's really worth building relationships with people when you're doing a tactic like this. You've got to build a relationship with a journalist, because at some point you are well known enough, you're respected enough, you're in enough of an authority that journalists will come to you to ask for an opinion, to ask for a bit of data, because firstly they know you've got it, and secondly they've had a good experience with you before and you've turned something around really quickly. So to sum up really, when you're looking at PR and SEO and the relationship between them, there are some aspects of this that SEO can't really do. So out of the traditional PR tactics, some of them we're just not geared up for, because it doesn't provide the value for our metrics. Like trade publications, for example, they just don't have the readership and they don't have the authority a lot of the time to make it worthwhile from an SEO perspective alone. And coverage is enough in these places for a lot of the time. Real world PR is not necessarily something that SEO is geared up for, but it is something that I think we should pursue if we know that it's going to get in front of enough people, because it really does have an impact. And lastly, really, crisis management is huge in PR, and businesses spend a large amount of money making sure that they have a crisis comms plan in place. But the SEO's thought is that when something goes really wrong, and that's going to be a lot of links. It's not necessarily positive press, but we are going to get some links from that. So not everyone is good at everything. And for us, when we had those technical link builders, like I started out as 4.5 years ago, when we had those people, they became technical SEOs. They didn't become PR people. They're not necessarily the right people for picking up a phone to a journalist and just talking about anything and talking about doing whatever it takes to get a link, basically. Technical SEO, technical link builders make really good technical SEOs. So for us, it was really important that we hired people to do PR. We hired people with that background. We hired people who have knowledge of that. Or more importantly, if you're going to try and transition into this, and you are a link builder at the minute, and you want to become a PR, and you want to do the kinds of things that I'm talking about, you've got to forget what you know. You've got to put to the back of your mind that you're pursuing a link as the absolute priority, and start thinking like a journalist. What do journalists want? So thank you very much. I hope that answered some of the questions, and I hope that you enjoyed that.